Gary, to tell, I mean, every day there's a new development, a new low. The latest is, of course, this training base, which is like 25 kilometers from the Polish border. I think 35 people have died. Do you think this changes anything?
Every day something changes and things are getting worse, because after Putin failed to win the war in 2 or 3 days as he planned, so he shifted to the strategy he knew best. So destroying the country, leveling the cities, and spreading his campaign of terror. We are witnessing now live war crimes on an industrial scale. And it's not just Putin's wrath, his revenge for the failure of his troops, but it's a psychological pressure. He believes, people will eventually capitulate, and it's his what he did in Grozny in 2000, what he did in Syria in 2015. He wants to bombard them into submission. And as for the military situation, things are not going that well for Russia. But unless there is a no-fly zone, unless Ukraine receives adequate supply of weapons to bring down Russian planes and also Russian missiles, I'm not sure for how long they can resist this assault. Because the strategic question is one now: can Russia encircle Kyiv? If they close this gap, that's on the south, that still remains open for Kyiv, for supply, it's food, medical, but most important, it's ammunition. If they succeed, hopefully not, then we will be seeing humanitarian catastrophe beyond anyone's imagination. We already saw horrors of Mariupol and Kharkiv, but Kyiv is much bigger. And I don't think Putin will move his troops into Kyiv because they understand that the urban warfare will limit their advantages in missiles and heavy armor. So they will keep pondering Kyiv, and the city could be also turned into rubbles. So the question now, it remains open: at what point NATO and America, that is the leading force in NATO, will recognize the simple fact: we are at war with Russia, whether we like it or not. And this war has been declared on us by Putin. We are fighting a war by other means: economic, political, technological, but it's a war. And Putin kept repeating, it's not just a war on Ukraine, it's a war against NATO. It's a war to redesign the world in his vision, which is, going back to medieval times.
Of course, and I understand that. I suppose what we have to understand here is that, someone like you have witnessed all this stuff from inside and then from outside, whereas perhaps the Americans, the British, other Western nations have only really witnessed it in recent years anyway, from the outside. So when the Americans say that we cannot intervene, we cannot have a no-fly zone because then the war will escalate between two nuclear powers, do you understand their fear?
No, I understand their fear, and I'm not going to say that this fear is unfounded. The question is, can you avoid escalation by showing weakness? So we know it from history, from the 1930s. It's being now repeated. So how the policy of appeasement and accommodation of Hitler's demands led to World War II. Same is happening now. Putin keeps escalating because he doesn't understand the language of compromises, appeasement, and weakness. I'm not arguing for us just to start a war. I'm telling that we have to recognize the reality on the ground. This is not just a war for Ukraine. And if Ukraine, God forbid, collapses and Putin occupies Ukraine, he cannot keep the country under control, but he will turn it into a desert, and he will continue his assault. He will be testing NATO on NATO territories. And right now we can interfere while Ukrainian army is still fighting. And with air support, they can inflict decisive damage to Putin's military machine. This is the war that has no tie. This is not a game of chess. It's either we win or Putin wins. And if he wins in Ukraine, the conflict will expand. It's not only in Europe, but it's also China, Iran. They're all watching now whether free world is willing to respond decisively to this open challenge.
So should we be negotiating at all then? Should we be going to Turkey and negotiating? Should Ukraine be sending their foreign minister to try to negotiate with Vladimir Putin or not?
Look, how can you blame Ukrainians for negotiating? Yesterday, on Saturday, we had a special program that you can still see on rdi.org. It's live reports from Ukraine, and we had an interview, long interview with the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, and many soldiers. Some of them are actually chess players fighting on the ground. So, and he expressed his not just dissatisfaction, I mean zero expectations from these conversations, but they have to try, because any attempt can be justified because it could save lives. But we all know that Putin has very little, if any, interest in a settlement. Putin looks at these negotiations as repeated attempts to force Ukraine to capitulate, and it's very unfortunate that there are forces, they're politicians on our side that are just trying to accommodate Putin. Clearly, the role that Israeli Prime Minister Bennett played, it's not something that he'll be proud of. It will not end up well in history books. But the question is whether Bennett was doing it on his own, trying to convince Ukrainians to accept Putin ultimatums, or under recommendations from Biden administration that also showed no true leadership now. And it seems to me that the Ukraine remains one of the important items of the agenda, but not the only one. And while you have the Iranian deal still pending, nuclear deal, that means that Russia remains a very important piece of the puzzle. And that's why I believe that America blocked the transfer of the MiG planes, fighter jets to Ukraine. And also, if you look at the sanctions and military supply to Ukraine, and we also did a special website tracking it. It's fightforukraine.org. 4 is as a number. So you'll find out, surprisingly, that America is lagging behind both European Union and Great Britain, which is just for me, it's inconceivable. So there's a belligerent rhetoric of President Biden, but when you look at the American actions, so they are somehow always give Putin wriggle room to avoid the worst. And again, I want the free world and America as a leader of the free world to recognize in this war we cannot have a tie. There's no return to status quo. Vladimir Putin is a war criminal, and his regime must go, because as long as he stays in Kremlin, there will be no peace.
Do you think that, I mean, you clearly think that Vladimir Putin wants to occupy Ukraine and perhaps wants to go after other nearby countries. Do you think he wants to engage in war with America and the UK, for example? Do you think he doesn't care if it happens or not?
I think Putin learned for more than 2 decades staying in power that the best way to deal with the free world playing this kind of geopolitical poker is to bluff. I can hardly blame him for bluffing now and raising stakes, because it worked. It worked many times in the past. And every time when he decided to raise the stakes and bluffed having a weak hand, the opposite side, say Obama administration in Syria, they folded the cards. Now he's making sort of it's a final push, the nuclear blackmail. Is he bluffing? Look, his hand is weak. I think even Putin, who lives in alternative reality, he knows that Russian army is no match to NATO. it's Russian army is stumbling in Ukraine, and NATO, even the limited force, can destroy the invading army probably within 24 hours. So he's bluffing, but can he push the button? Probably yes. Again, I don't want to say no, since I'm not so sure, and definitely is a mad dictator. He can do whatever. That's why the question is not Putin anymore. The question is whether he will have enough people to carry his criminal, crazy orders and to push the button to start use chemicals, biological or nuclear weapons. Well, and every day that we delay our decision to oppose him most decisively increases this risk. It's again, that's what we learned from history. So the generals could decide, yeah, but Putin always, was right with his crazy ideas. I think now we should concentrate on these people, on generals, on admirals in Ukraine that will have to take the hit, because let's say Putin wants to start with tactical nuclear weapons. So that's, as far as I understand the command chain, that probably decision could be left with an admiral in one of the probably ships in the Black Sea. So will he do that? I don't know, because if he knows that the moment he pushes the button, the American missile or British missile will destroy him, I doubt very much that Russian army has the rank and files of kamikazes. Same with Russian pilots. They prove to be very good by attacking maternity houses and apartments and innocent civilians. I'm not so sure they will be willing to die, because they know doing the same with NATO imposing a no-fly zone means dying. So we have to make sure that all of them will pay instantly, not in Hague. This is endless hearings about war crimes. Now. That's our best chance. Again, I'm not saying it was easy hard. I hate, just saying that we have to take this challenge and to engage Russia militarily. I don't see any other choice, because every day that we postpone it, Putin pushes forward. Look at his bombing campaign. It started in the east. It's almost at Polish border. So we're talking about Poland. Don't forget, there's Lithuania next to Belarus. And the only reason Lukashenko is not engaged in the war, in open war, because every piece of evidence we can get from Belarus that his army is not willing to do that. So he's afraid. Putin is pushing him, but Lukashenko knows his people. Sending troops to Ukraine means that many of them probably will desert, and some of them maybe turn their weapons against him. So, but it's so explosive, and I can hardly imagine that we can avoid the further escalation, especially because Russian propaganda insists. It's not I'm saying. They say we are at war with NATO and America. So if Ukraine, God forbid, loses the war in Russia, they will say America lost the war, NATO lost the war, which is it's hard to reconcile. But the Russian propaganda doesn't care about reality. It's all about the images that they want to pretend, just to be reality.
Of course, but the one thing though that all Russians will be feeling now, the middle classes as well, is the the effect of the sanctions, the ruble, the companies coming out of Russia. That's something that they are actually feeling now. So do you think that will make any difference at all? We've seen some protests, small scale protests in Russia. Do you think as this continues, we can hope to see any kind of uprising by the Russian people or not?
You just said small scale protest. Yeah, by the size of Russia, I agree. So you're talking about tens of thousands of people going to the streets. Nearly 15,000 people have been arrested throughout this last 2 weeks campaign of protests in Russia. But this is very different from demonstrating in London or in Paris or in Washington. People who go to the streets of Russia, they know that they will be beaten by the police, detained, and probably will end up in jail for years. Now, if you are protesting against the war in Russia, 3 years in jail. If you are talking about real losses of Russian troops in Ukraine, up to 15 years. So this is kind of civic heroism that people are willing to sacrifice themselves because they believe they have no other choice. It's a moral choice. So if you have tens of thousands of people on the streets, I can bet you there are millions that are sympathetic but are afraid. So it's very difficult to measure the temperature of Russian society now, because Russia is now, it's almost closed. So this is, they banned everything, Facebook, Instagram, so it's YouTube's, everything is closed. There's still, piece of data coming here and there. It seems to me that it's the first time that Putin is no longer relying on majority of the country. So there's a big chunk of population that is in apathy, is in fear, is in panic, but it's the active support is not that it used to be. 8 years ago, when Putin made his first invasion of Ukraine, annexing Crimea, you saw crowds, jubilant crowds celebrating. Nothing. So you don't have any sign of spontaneous enthusiasm. Yes, state sponsored, yes, but it's not public in public mood now. How long will it take for people to rise and for this political anti-war protest to turn into the social and economic revolt? Months, 2 months, 3 months, but it will not take long, because if sanctions stay, and it's very important, it's not just the list of items of sanctions, but it's a political will. If it's very clear that America and Europe and Great Britain will stay with this policy for a continuous period, I think we can expect soon the massive uprising in Russia, also for a simple reason. Putin may run out of money. At the end of the day, Putin's dictatorship is not ideological. This is not Hitler or Stalin. There are no fanatics who are willing to die. It's mafia state, and it's all it's based on a simple principle: loyalty in exchange for benefits. And if there is no money to pay for police, security apparatus, propaganda, I don't think there will be doing Putin's bidding anymore. So if we help Ukraine to survive, and Putin's military defeat will become obvious, combined with the worsening conditions in Russia, I would give 2 to 3 months before the situation will go out of control for Putin.
That is very interesting. Finally, Garry, could you just explain the flags behind you? So you have the Ukrainian flag, and then what is the other flag? Yeah, the other flag is, I hope there will be flag of new Russia, new free Russia. So as you know, that Russia shifted from the Soviet red flag to old Russian flag that had 3 stripes, white, blue, and red. And now it happens spontaneously. Many people believe that the free Russia must not have a red stripe. No more blood on our flag. So we all hope that will be the flag of Russia, free of Putin, the Russia that will become part of the family of civilized nations, part of the global solutions, and no longer an enemy of the free world. Well, let's hope so. Garry, thank you very much for talking to us. Thank you very much.